In episode 33 of the Mindfulness and Grief Podcast, we explore the shared death experience with author and transformational psychologist, Dr. Sharon Prentice. The Mindfulness and Grief Podcast offers compassionate insights and practical tips to help you cope with grief and re-engage meaningfully with your life after loss. I am your host, Heather Stang, thanatologist and author of Mindfulness and Grief. For additional grief support, visit the Mindfulness and Grief Institute at mindfulnessandgrief.com, where you can download my free guide, Navigating Grief, the Mindful Way to Cope with Loss. My guest today is Dr. Sharon Prentice, author of Becoming Starlight, a shared death journey from darkness to light, in which she talks about surviving grief and mending the wounds of loss. As a transformational psychologist, Dr. Prentice specializes in advanced temperament profiling for the psychological, business, and information communities. She holds a board certification in individual and group therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, integrated marriage and family therapy, crisis and abuse therapy, grief therapy, and spiritual direction through life coaching. So, Sharon Prentice, welcome to the Mindfulness and Grief Podcast. I have been looking forward to hearing you on the show for a while. People may not realize this, but when I was 12, and I wanted to share this with you, I was probably 12 or 13. My uncle had died by suicide when I was 7, and I walked into a bookstore and I picked up a book called Life After Life.
Oh, yes, my bud. Yeah.
Which, talked about near-death experiences.
Yes.
And I can't say that book made me happy because his chapter at the time, and I haven't read if there's update, but the experiences people had for suicide, it wasn't uplifting. And okay, and that's not where I want to spend my time, because I want to spend my time on your experience and what you talk about from your shared death journey.
But this is important for you to understand.
Yeah.
Okay, since you experienced that. That book was written quite a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
There has been so much research done since then, not just with near-death experiences, but with the shared death experience and out-of-body experience. And people have come to look at consciousness and the soul and spirit in such a different way. Okay, so if anyone tells you that it is different for someone who has committed suicide versus someone who hasn't, just kind of go, yeah, okay.
This is exactly why I wanted to have you on here.
Yeah, because it's not, sweetheart. It's not, it is our consciousness that survives. And let's take this into the spiritual realm, and then we can, most of what people say about suicide, they are taken literally based on scripture somewhere. Okay. And if you look at so much of the research that has come into place since then with people who have had suicides in their family, and then with people who have had all of these spiritual experiences, consciousness is consciousness, okay? And think of it this way, darling. Every single one of us are in this world because creation, God, whatever you want to call it, the universe, God, create, whatever, thought of us, breathed life into us. And so we carry that thought of God. Why on earth would a loving God, a loving creation, a loving universe condemn someone to this literal fiery hell? It makes no sense. It is a waste of energy, and love does not destroy love, which is what consciousness is. So you just put that out of your head. It doesn't belong there because it's not based on fact or any type of real spiritual reasoning.
And that's what the 12 or 13-year-old Heather kind of felt. Like, yeah. I was like, I do not accept this.
Good.
I didn't know, and I'm still what I would call an open-hearted agnostic around many things.
Okay.
But there's always that wondering of what happened after.
Well, if you want to take it from an agnostic point of view, when you look at life in general, people in general, one thing we don't like to talk about, and I'm sure you know this because of what you do, there is a place inside of all of us that is beyond hopelessness, okay? And I call it the underside of the soul. And until we are willing to go to that place, okay, and pull out all of those shadows that cause these unbelievably despairing and anguished feelings, that place of hopelessness grows and grows and grows until you really do not see a way out. That is what happens to a lot of people when they commit suicide. They don't want to, but they do not see a way out, and they think they are causing so much pain for everyone else around them, not just their own pain, but pain for everyone else around them. So if you want to look at it from that point of view, that's okay. But I think you're probably finding that you can't totally look at that without some spiritual aspect, because we are energy. We come from creation. Okay? What was creation? You got to, if you carry it, so I see you laughing with that. You know what I'm saying? There's that
I do.
That one little step. Yeah.
That's why I leave the door open. It's like, and this is why I love that we're just diving deep right off the bat. And I want to back up a moment, because a lot of the people listening don't know your story.
Okay.
So they know from the intro, you wrote a book, Becoming Starlight. But would you tell us in your own words, what led you to this place where you are right now?
Oh my gosh, it started with me not being agnostic, I don't know if I want to call myself an atheist or a totally pissed off person who believed. I mean, it started with the loss of my daughter. My first child died in my arms. And when something like that happens, before her death, I begged, I bargained, I pleaded, you name it. It was take me, don't take her. All of the things that we do when someone that is our very life's blood is dying. And she died anyway. Even with all of my pleas, I had been taught from the time I was a child, we were church-going family, like most Americans were. And I would sit there and I would hear this minister talk about God. And my version of God became Charlton Heston, the Ten Commandments, the guy with the long beard and the hair and the robes and the powerful, out there somewhere. And I was always told that he was outside of me, that this God was outside of me and he was watching me. And if I did anything wrong, if I said anything wrong, down came the lightning bolts and, So at a very young age, I decided I was going to be the good little girl. I wasn't going to do anything wrong, I wasn't saying anything wrong. I was going to be as perfect as I could be. Because if I was, nothing bad would ever happen to me. So when I reached out to this God I thought I knew to save my daughter and it didn't happen, I realized that it wasn't real. None of it was real. It didn't feel real anymore. There was nothing left of any type of spiritual, religious belief in me that stayed. It all went away. And to me, if there was a God, he was the meanest, the most cruel, one of these, and I wanted nothing to do with it. Very shortly after my daughter died, my husband started getting sick. He was military, and nobody knew what was wrong with him. It was doctor after doctor after doctor, but being in the military and doing what he did, he was an electronics warfare officer, and he was heading to war. And so we actually moved to San Diego. They have the SEER training out there that they give to, Navy SEALs and like that. So he was going through that training, sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker. And they finally realized something was wrong. And So I was very happy that he couldn't finish the training. That meant he wasn't going to go off to war, but there was still this illness. Long story short, it ended up being pancreatic cancer. Because of his job, what he did, his body was totally bombarded with things that no human's body should ever be bombarded with. And once again, I'll fast forward. It took 8 years for them to come up with a diagnosis of what was really going on with him. And the last day of his life, the tumors in his body had started breaking up, and they traveled to his brain. So he could no longer see or hear or feel or, nothing. And that actually was a blessing in disguise, because every nerve ending in his body was on fire, and I hadn't been able to touch him for 6 months. We lived in the hospital for 6 months. So when the doctors told me that, his doctors had become my friends by then, I crawled up into the bed behind him and just wrapped him in my arms and just held him, all the while denying that he was going to die. I had set up this existential battle with death. Okay. It's like, I am going to beat you. You took my daughter. You are not going to take this man. So these control features of mine, although they made absolutely no sense whatsoever, this was not a logical response. This was definitely just pure emotion. So I set up this battle. So I held him like that all day long until like 10:30 at night, when our oncologist, who, like I said, by then was a very good friend of ours, he was sitting there with us all day. And he asked me to please get up so he could check Steve's vitals. And I did. I went into the bathroom, and I had no more rounded the door into the bathroom when I heard my oncologist just shout out these words I won't say on here, because some of your listeners may not like those words, but you can imagine. What had happened was Steve had rolled over, which was absolutely impossible. He was on his back, because when I got out of the bed, the doctor laid him down so he could check his vitals. Steve had rolled back over, and he was laying on his right side. And when the doctor yelled, of course, I took off out of the bathroom and almost slipped on those, those ugly, waxed, linoleum floors that are so freaking slippery. So I raced around, and I saw what had happened. And I raced around to the side of the bed, and I got down so that we were, face to face, nose to nose. And he had opened his eyes. My mom and dad and the private duty nurse I had hired and our oncologist, they were all there. This was, ever seeing mouths just gape open where people are just, this cannot be happening? Well, that's what was happening in that room. And I looked into his eyes, and I knew he saw me. You know when you look at someone and you see the light in their eyes? I knew he saw me. And so I looked at him, and of all the stupid things to say, I said, "What are you staring at?" Because it was expected. I had set up this battle, and I thought, I won. I beat death. And if there was a God, screw you, I beat you. It was one of those. And he looked at me when I said that, and he said, "I just want to remember he spoke."
Wow.
My oncologist once again let out a string of words that in essence meant, I cannot believe what I'm seeing right here. This is not supposed to be happening, but that's not the way he put it, And when Steve spoke, I gasped, one of those. And I breathed in his breath, because we were nose to nose. I breathed in his breath. And the whole time I'm thinking, I did it. I beat this. He is going to live. And that feeling that rushes through your body, when you think you've won the biggest battle that you'll ever have in your entire life. I was so hyped and so just beyond joyful. And I had closed my eyes when I gasped in, because it was like, but at the same time, it was so uplifting. And then I opened my eyes. This was all a matter of seconds. This wasn't, sounds like it took an hour, but, it didn't. And I opened my eyes, and I looked back at him, and his eyes had gone dark. And I knew that he had died. At that moment, I cannot even tell you the feeling. It was the same feeling when my daughter died. This utter, that's why I said earlier about the hopelessness. There is a place within you, okay? And I just slumped to the floor when I realized that he was gone, because that meant he, my daughter, everything in my life, my entire identity, because I had wrapped myself around this man, and it was all gone. And I just slumped to the floor. But then everything started to change, and I stood. And I have told people that I stood by a power that wasn't my own. I was powered by something outside of myself. And I stood, and I noticed that the ceiling was turning to mist. And the floor I was standing on, I knew I was standing on this floor because I had been on that floor for 6 months. I knew it was there. I could feel it, It started to disappear. The walls of the room started to disappear. And I noticed the stars. That's why the book's called Becoming Starlight. There were billions and billions and billions of stars. And I could see each one of them very distinctly, each one very unique. And yet they form this incredible light, one big light. And people have asked me what color it is. And I said, it wasn't a color. It was, to use the word color, something I'd never, ever seen before. It wasn't white, wasn't yellow, wasn't pink, wasn't nothing. It was something I did not recognize. But I did recognize something within those stars. There was a presence in there that was so comforting and so peaceful. And I have said that I went into those stars. I didn't walk in. I was still in the same place I was the whole time. And yet I walked into those stars because I recognized the presence. I have told people it was a long ago forgotten memory, and it felt like home. It felt like home, and I went freely. I did. I was like, let me at it. I mean, I was right there. And he was there. Steve was there. I saw him. Now, Steve was a big guy. He was like 6'4", 200 and something pounds. And when he died, he didn't even weigh, 99 pounds. The cancer had just eaten him away. But there he was standing in front of me, healthy, gorgeous. The thing that attracted to me in the first place when I first met him were his eyes. He had these gorgeous chocolate almond-shaped eyes that were just, they just drew you in. And I noticed that about him. He was just well, and he was happy, and he was joyful, and he was smiling, and it was like, I knew where I was, Heather. I knew where I was. I don't call it heaven. I do not call it heaven, because every description I'd ever had of heaven, right, did not match where I was. And so even in the book, I call it that place. I don't call it heaven, because I don't want people to think, when you say heaven, what is it that you think of?
Yeah, it brings back old memories of, the images of childhood. Although I also now sometimes, I don't know if you ever read the book, What Dreams May Come.
Yes, exactly.
I love that book. Like, heaven is what you want it to be, or even in The Good Place, which is kind of a very funny little movie, TV show. But yes, heaven does conjure up, a lot of fixed ideas. I think that's it. It's the fixed ideas. And again,
that's why I don't call it heaven. I didn't want people to go to their version. That was very important to me, because what I found there, and when people say, what did you find there? Here's the only thing that I can say to you. I was given, I call it a peek into foreverness. I was given a glimpse of what happens after physical death. Okay? And what I found, if you can get a piece of paper and write every single emotion that the human condition has within it, all the negatives, all the positives, your body, your brain, your heart goes through every single one of them within a matter of seconds to this place of being numb, where it's okay to just be. You don't have to be anything. You don't have to think anything. You don't have to feel anything. You just are. And the peace, there's still, even after all this time, there's still no word for the peace and the joy and see, here I'm going to go with this long string of words again, because there's no word, I didn't know what it was. I mean, I didn't know what it was. I did find myself I always use the words coming back, because I don't know how else to say it. And I'm back in the same room, dirty floored, all the stuff in the hospital room, and the stars started to go away. And there I am, and my in-laws were there by that time. And of course, my parents were there the whole time. My doctor was actually taking my blood pressure and checking my pulse and all that, because they didn't know what was happening to me. They were afraid, for me. And the first thing I said, I looked around the room, I saw everybody, and I said, that was the most awesome thing I've ever experienced. And, oh my God, my in-laws, they were so angry at me. Exactly. They were so angry at me because it was totally out of context. Here, their child had just died, and I'm saying how awesome it was, So I had to explain. And that's when I found Dr. Moody. Raymond has become a really good friend of mine, and he's just the kindest, most gentlest person on the earth.
He's done remarkable research. And
yes.
One of the things, I'd picked up that book when I was really young, but then we did study, near-death experiences in my master's program in thanatology, of course. And even talking, I remember my professor, Dr. Terry Martin, was talking about children and who've had near-death experiences and how it really radically changed. Like they just become like these little enlightened beings that grow up into enlightened humans. So it maybe for those, not everyone who's on this call may have heard of Dr. Moody's work. Do you want to maybe, and again, we're giving you the backstory to my bookstore extravaganza when I was 12 or 13. And by the way, I did not buy the book because I didn't want my family to know that I was doing inquiry into my uncle's death. And this was also the time where some of you've heard this story where I started rifling through my grandmother's files to find out information about his death. It was very, this adolescence period sparked a lot of curiosity. So maybe share who Dr. Moody is and his work.
Back in the 70s, Dr. Moody is actually the one who coined the term near-death experience. He is the one that actually started all of this research. And one of the first things, he was teaching at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. And one of the professors there, one of his colleagues, had lost her mother. And she knew Raymond was interested in these types of experiences. And she went to him and she said, I need to tell you a story. And it was about her mother's death and what happened to her during that. So he's like, I got to find... I got to see what's going on here, because he had heard, you hear these little bits and pieces from people, all over the place. And so he is the one that started the entire field of the near-death experience. And because of Raymond, there is more research, global research into all the different types of spiritual experiences. He has so many books out there. I don't even remember the name of half of them. Most of them are here in my library. But he is the one that explained to me what a shared death experience was, because I thought I'd go nuts. And my oncologist has said, no, I've seen things sort of like this before. And a lot of my patients, families, have told me these things before. What is this? And that set me out. That set me on my quest to find something. And that's when I found Raymond. And to this day, he still does all kinds of research. There is actually a website now that Lisa is running, Lisa Smart. Lisa has a great book out called Words at the Threshold, where she did some research into the words people use when they're dying, which is an amazing phenomenon. I'm part of that a lot with all of my patients when they lay dying. It's such a blessing and an honor to be with them, to hear their last words. And what Lisa did in her book, and what I try and encourage my families to do, is remember what people say, and then, like you, research it, because you will find so much truth in those words. And not only will you find truth in those words, what you will find is who they are talking to. That is such a spiritual experience, who they are talking to. With what you do, I'm going to ask you a question here, because I have found this. I believe that soul, the spirit, whatever word you want to use, actually starts to disconnect from the body before the actual physical death. And so being there, watching this, feeling this, listening to the words that are spoken, have you run into that in your work?
This is so outside of what I do because I'm not sitting with dying people, but I will say this. When I am in a meditation practice where I've reached a state of equanimity or just that calm, which, by the way, people, doesn't happen all the time. So just keep meditating, and every now and then you bump into it. Yeah. But there are those moments where you feel bigger. You're more expansive than body.
Absolutely.
Awareness is bigger than body. And this is why, again, I thought it was interesting to talk to you, because we're talking about something that you can't show a picture of this. You can't touch this. And there are these moments in meditation practice where if you were to say, what was that experience like? I could use words to describe it, but they're not going to accurately depict
exactly
the experience.
Yeah, there aren't words for it. Now, I do something a little different. You do the meditation, which is fantastic. But my form of meditation is maybe a little different than other people's, or maybe it's not. Now that I think
about it. What do you do? Because there are types. They're all valid.
Here's what I discovered. When I had that experience, when my husband died, everyone in the room said that this noise came out of me that I couldn't tell you. I didn't hear it, but they said this noise came out of me that they could not describe. And after he died, I went and talked to everybody. I talked to priests, I talked to rabbis, I talked to monks. I went everywhere you could think of, to find exactly what had happened. And these were closer to me than, before I found Raymond. And when I would explain to them about this noise, they said to me, I do a mystic practice, okay? Because what I discovered after all of these deaths is I found the mystic's way of belief. I found the mystic's way of meditation and all of that. And what they were telling me was that what I tapped into was sacred word, okay? This noise that came out of me was my sacred word. And you could call it, you could say it went into centering prayer, you could, whatever, that space that you were talking about, that brings you right into the presence of the divine, that place, where I was, maybe. I'm still trying to sort all of that out. But for me, my meditation practice is surrender first. Surrender. Be still. Let that egoic mind that drives us nuts just relax, and get into that state of, like I said before, of absolute numbness, okay? Where that underside that I call the underside of the soul starts to waken up. That can be where you find that sacred word, and being taken into that place that is just really nothing, okay? Because your mind, your body, your soul, your spirit, everything is in such a calm, numb. It is absolutely renewing, and it totally changes your way of life. I say, for me, it was sacred word, which takes you right into what the mystics call the heart of hearts. I'm sure you've heard of that. And the only thing people, individuals, whatever you want to call it, that are allowed in that heart of hearts is your creator and his creation, which is you. Nothing else is allowed in there. And when you get into that space, once you see it, you can't unsee it. You know what I mean? And that changes everything. It changes every single solitary thing about your life. It changes your environment. And unfortunately, the people around you either have to change with you or they have to leave your environment because, like I said, you can't unsee it. And you have to surround yourself with this calm and this beauty. And it's a good thing. Most people want it, so they don't leave. Most people want to know, what'd you find? Help me get there. And I'm sure that's what you do with your meditation practice and all of your clients.
Yeah,
so it's a little different.
It's a little bit, but they're still similar. They're cousins, at least, close cousins.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the meditation that I teach, particularly when people are early in their grief experience, is like surrender. It's letting go. And sometimes it's learning how to focus on a mantra or a sacred word, or something where you can give your mind a place to rest.
Absolutely. We all need that.
And it's like so fun to watch, because I know that eventually we learn not to do this. Like a beginning meditator, it's like trying to meditate really hard.
I know.
You know, but when you can just let go and understand it's not about, there's some control, but there's also a lack of control. So I've always believed, well, not always, but as a thinking adult,
I know what you mean. Yeah.
that where there is paradox, there's often truth. And
Absolutely.
with meditation, you have both, right? You have
yes. I would find myself, I'd say, I'm going a little panicky here. I got to get into this, and I would sit comfortably and do all the things that I know that would help me. But I would find myself saying, "Which jeans am I going to wear tomorrow? Oh, yeah, I'm going to give that to so and so." And I'm like, "Oh no, this just isn't." So until I'm ready, to go to that place, and a lot of people give up too soon. I'm sure you kind of, they give up too soon.
Oh, true.
And with grief, I don't know what you have found in grief. So here's another question for you. I deal with the families of those that I have lost.
Can you, before you ask the question, tell people what you do?
I am a transformative psychologist, and I specialize in temperament testing.
And you work with people who are dying?
I work with people who are dying, terminally ill, and their families. Okay. I'm the person that's called in after they get, the white coat saying, you have this or this or this, and, life stops for a second. And then I'm the person called in to help get the family, and more importantly, the person ready for everything that is coming. I know it sounds not like there's no hope, but no, it is totally the opposite. These diagnoses are not death sentences anymore, all of them. They're just not. I mean, there's been so much research, and it's much better than it used to be. But when I do lose a patient, I deal with their families afterwards, the grief state. And what I have found, here's what I want to know if you have found this too. What I have found is that so many people hang on to that moment of death. Their grief is stuck in that moment of death, that everything else gets wiped out, because they think if they let go of that grief, they're letting go of the person. And I try to tell them it is the exact opposite. You find the gratitude for their life. You remember all the wonderful things instead of that moment of death. What do you
I think that's really part of the process of grief for many people. I see it all the time. I've seen it in myself when I've had major losses, where that moment is what you fixate on.
Yes.
I don't think that's inherently problematic. I think it's normal. What happens is people start to eventually see the bigger picture. Through their grief work, through meditation, through all the things that we do. And so it's one of those things that when it comes up with a client, or I was giving a talk to some hospice nurses, and they were like, what do you do when someone's, fixated on it?
Right.
And I was like, well, first allow them to be where they are.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that. Yes.
Because it's part of the process. Know inside, notice that part of you that wants to fix this. Yes. And know inside that for most people, this is what happens, and that through their work, they're going to get there. And, if it's appropriate, you can offer them some hope, but you have to be, if you sat down with someone in that first hour after their loved one died, and you said, listen, in a few years, you're going to be able to go to work. You're going to feel like showering again. Well, how helpful? That's not helpful.
The one that I like the best, seriously, the one that I like the best is, God knows best.
Yeah.
I was told that so many times. And then I would say, well, if you think that this is God's best, and then I would use some of those words, that I don't want to say here.
Which, by the way, I appreciate it. Not that our listeners are I mind, but then I have to tick this box for the podcast that says it's explicit, which it is not.
Well, but you know exactly.
But yeah,
exactly.
But yeah, there are people who do, they don't know what to say. And this is why I want to come back to your experience, because you can still believe in God and believe that the afterlife is a peaceful place. And again, I am the open-hearted agnostic. I don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
But I've seen different things happen in my grief experience and heard different things from different people that I know I don't know because I've not experienced it. But experiences such as yours bring me hope, and I think can bring hope to a lot of our listeners whose loved ones had a really rough end of life, or who died before their time, or who died after 50 years of marriage, or whatever it is. We want to know that they're going to be okay.
They are, because you know what happened when the experience was all over, all the anger and the rage and the bitterness and the hatred, that was just taken from me. I didn't do anything to get rid of it. It was just gone because of what I saw. And the big thing for me, and this is really huge, and I know people out there don't know me, and they may read the book and say, oh, okay, that's cool. But the big thing for me was that it was all okay. I knew he was safe. I knew he was happy and more joyful than he'd ever been. But the big deal was that I knew he was going to be with our daughter. And what that did for me, it changed my entire life. That's why I do what I do. It changed my entire life knowing that they were together. Now, I cannot say to you that what I saw was physical. Who knows? Okay. I was still in a hospital room, and yet I was in this place. Okay. So is this a mystical, magical, mystery tour? And was I in what form I was? I couldn't tell you. I just know that it was me and it was him. And I knew he had to go away to a place that I was not going to be allowed to go because I didn't have any reason to be there. That's why I said I was given a glimpse. Yeah. Okay, I was given a peek. He was going somewhere else. And do you know, his smile started to change. And he started I want to say he was disappearing from view. Now, I cannot tell you he walked away. I cannot tell you what it was. I didn't know if it was me that was returning to where I was supposed to be, or if it was him that started going first. I don't have the answer to that. But what I did know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, was that he was going to be with our daughter. And that said to me, it's very obvious what, people would say, well, that's so obvious. But it wasn't before this experience that she was fine. She was fine. And that they were going to be together. And I knew from that experience that one day I was going to be there too. And I would be able to hold her again and smile and touch her and just all of those things that I have missed, with her growing up with me. But it was okay. I wasn't sad. That doesn't make any sense, does it? I wasn't sad when I lost a view of him. I wasn't sad. I didn't even feel the need to say goodbye because it was so right. It was just right. And I knew things were exactly the way they were supposed to be. They were fine. I was fine. And it just changed every single solitary thing about me. That is why I do what I do. I didn't choose this. I really didn't. I didn't choose to do this. It was something that was very organically saying, here, you have to go do that.
And I also love that you do admit that sometimes you feel sad. You miss him. Of course, it doesn't mean that those very real human feelings aren't there.
Oh, absolutely, they're there. It's even going through one of those experiences, you still experience the sadness and the despair and the anguish when you're losing someone because you're still human and you still have all of those feelings. But the thing that is different about me and about other people who have had these experiences, yes, we have all of those same emotions. But at the moment of death, I actually have to be careful sometimes, Heather, because my first instinct when someone actually leaves their body is to smile because I know where they are. I know they now see and are experiencing even more than what I tried to give to them. That's why I wrote this book. I wrote this book for them because they all asked me, when I'm not with you a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road, and we want to go back during these sad periods, because we always mark these anniversaries, someone's death as if it's going to happen all over again. And they wanted something to read. So that's why I wrote Starlight. But when someone dies, seriously, I think they know now. And I'm not smiling because they died. I'm smiling because they now know. So a lot of times I'll have to leave the room and let the family just be with them and then get the smile off my face and then go back in because I don't want another one of those. This was the most awesome experience, and have their reaction to me the same way my in-laws' reaction was to me, that was like, yeah, no,
Context is everything.
Yes, especially in something like this. It really is.
Yeah. But, part of mindfulness is being able to hold the space for the myriad of emotions.
Yes.
When my grandmother died, she had vascular dementia. And, there was relief and sadness.
Yes.
Because
absolutely.
Even though, again, I don't know, I felt like there was an alleviation of suffering.
Yeah.
Mentally, physically, spiritually. And you can have a very mixed bag of feelings all at once.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's just, like I said, the human condition. Okay. That's what we do. And I guess through my experiences, I have been able to somehow integrate consciousness with what is pre-conscious. You know what I'm saying? Putting those together, realizing that life and death and joy and sorrow and all of those, despair and peace, it's all part of the deal, and when you actually get in there and you experience it all at the same time, then try to integrate that into your waking everyday experience. It makes a difference. It really, really makes a difference for how you are able to then go on still feeling that tremendous loss, but knowing that you just didn't dissolve into nothingness, which is a big fear that a lot of people have.
Yeah. So Dr. Sharon Prentice, I am so grateful for your wisdom and your heart. I know I often say this on these recordings. You all are not looking at her right now. I am looking at her. She has just such a glowing, beautiful presence. And
thank you, darling.
And, your patients are very lucky to have you. Your families are very lucky to have you and your husband and your daughter. And
I'm very blessed by all of them to be able to share what I call the most sacred moments in someone's life. Most people think it's birth. It's not. The most sacred moment in someone's life is in their dying moments, and being able to share in that vulnerability and the love, those two things when they collide with each other is, I cannot even explain to you what that feels like.
It's another one of those ineffable moments.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. It absolutely is. Thank you for this. I enjoyed talking to you, and don't you worry about your uncle one little bit. I know exactly where he is, and he's fine, and he's healthy, and he's joyful, sweetie.
That's beautiful. Joyful. That's fortunately the sense I came away with from my own knowing. And no disrespect to Dr. Moody. Those were different times and different perspectives. And so where can people find more about you and more about Becoming Starlight?
Let's see. I'm pretty new on Instagram. I wrote an article very recently for Compassionate Friends, which is people who've lost children.
Great.
And my Instagram shot up to like 13,000 in a matter of days. So they can find me there, Sharon Prentice, PhD. They can go to what they call my professional Facebook page. I hate that because it makes me sound like, the white-coated whatever, and I'm not. That's also Sharon Prentice, PhD. My website is sharonprentice.com. Let's see. You can get the book anywhere. The easiest place is Amazon, but, Barnes & Noble and Indies, all those other places. If you want it, you can find it just about anywhere. So I'm all over the place.
I want to say on your professional Facebook page, you're kind of tongue in cheek, because I love that you address the hot messes.
You know how that happened? Do we have time for me to tell you just how that happened for a minute? The type of therapy that I do, like I said, is called, I am a transformative psychologist, and transformative psychology takes in the emotional, psychological, the physical, but more importantly, the spiritual. And then I marry that with something called temperament theory. And temperament theory is, this is who you were created to be. It is a spiritual type of therapy. And so many times my patients would say to me, "You're going to make me a crazy hot mess," right? All of them. And then I got tired of just hearing that. And so I said, "Yeah, you are a crazy hot mess, but you're also a beautiful soul." So that's where that comes from. My office is full of plaques and hats and pictures and everything where people made me stuff that said crazy hot mess. And that's where it came from. I did not give myself
But it's so great, because I always refer to myself, if I'm not doing well, because I like to have a little humor, and people are like, "How you doing?" I'm like, "I'm a hot mess today." And then it's just like that. It's acceptance, and it's kind of funny. So when I went to your Facebook page and I saw crazy hot mess and beautiful soul, and I was like, "Oh, I love her already."
That's where it came
we speak
from.
The same language.
Oh, we take ourselves way too seriously.
It's true.
I am not the type of person that sits there and says, "I hear what you're saying. You hear what you're saying." I'm the type of person that looks at you and says, "You're lying. Don't lie to me. Tell me the truth. You pay good money to come see me. You're going to tell me the truth. You're going to make me a crazy hot mess." So, it's that's where that came from. But everybody seems to like it because everyone identifies with it.
Yeah. And grief is so messy.
Oh, it is.
And it's soul work. It's messy soul work. There we go.
It is. And the thing about grief, I know I'm going on too long here, but you can cut, edit, do whatever you want.
We're still We're still rolling.
Oh, there we go.
We're fine.
One of the things that I tell people all the time, please grieve the way you need to. Stop thinking that you have to protect everyone in your environment. Everyone is going to grieve differently, whether you're a mom, a dad, a sibling, a friend, whatever, okay? Everyone has to grieve the way they need to, whether that is screaming out loud, laying on the floor and kicking and screaming, hiding under a blanket by yourself in isolation, going out, getting drunk, whatever it is you need to do. You need to do that, because if you don't, you're never, ever going to be able to get inside that grief and kick it to the curbs. You're just not going to. And we don't say what we want to say. We don't deal with our grief the way we want to deal with it because we're afraid of hurting another person. My husband and I did that when we lost our daughter. And it was brutal. I was trying to protect him. He was trying to protect me. And so we emotionally isolated ourselves from each other, which we did not mean to do, but the day came when I realized how sick he was and that I was adding to that sickness by not telling him exactly how I felt, because I didn't want to add to his grief. So people need to understand that you have to grieve in your own way. And if you can't think of something to say, like you were saying earlier, where people will say, "Oh, a few years from now," oftentimes it's better just to sit there with someone and not say a darn word. Hand them a cup of tea or a Coke or whatever, and just be there.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Sharon. Dr. Sharon, may I call you that?
Yeah, but just Sharon's fine. Honestly, honey, Sharon's fine. Yeah, I have never, when people say Dr. Prentice, I turn around and look behind me and look for, my dad. I'm like, no, I don't like to be separated from people. Yeah. And I do not put myself up here and anyone else down below me, because that is totally ridiculous. And I want to be on the same level with people, because that's where the good talk comes from. Because we've all been there. We've all been to these places. There are only a certain number of human emotions that we can all experience, and we have all experienced them at one time or another. And I want people to know that I understand, because I've been there. So Sharon's fine.
All right, Sharon. Well, everybody listening, you can go to mindfulnessandgrief.com/podcast. You will see Sharon's picture and Becoming Starlight there. You can click on that link to get to the show notes page, which will have her website, links to the book, her bio, all of her social media, so that you can be inspired by her journey of love and connection. And I just am very grateful for all that you do for your patients and their families. The moment of death, as we know what happens in that moment, can really impact our grief trajectory, and having a compassionate, loving professional who is Sharon, not a hierarchy white coat, but just right there with us, can provide the safe container we need and the love and acceptance that we need. So thank you for doing the work that you do and for spending time with me and our audience.
Thank you, Heather. I like talking to people who get me.
I get you. We are crazy hot messes and beautiful souls.
Those are my people. Those are my people.
And on that note, I will say namaste and have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for listening to the Mindfulness and Grief Podcast. If you found this to be helpful, please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review so that other grieving people can find this resource with ease. And don't forget to visit us at mindfulnessandgrief.com, where you can download the free Navigating Grief Guide and find other helpful resources. A very special thank you to the Atomic Mosquitoes, who provide us with our theme music, and to Todd Campbell of Hub City Recording, who engineers this podcast. I'm Heather Stang, and I hope that you will join me for the next episode. Until then, be kind to everyone, especially yourself.